So hey anime fans. The series name is What If Naruto was in Ben 10 and had Harem, so let's start the series. The sky is clear, and you can see the stars for miles. Lying on his back, a small child with raven hair who was kicked out of his house and has no qualms about sleeping in the bush gazes up at the sky. The boy's shirt and slacks, now stripped to black and orange boxers, are drying on a nearby tree. He has 3 whisker-like birthmarks on each cheek and piercing emerald eyes. It was Naruto, the demon of Hyde Ninja Village, who killed the Yondaime headmaster. The same monster that killed the Yondaime is actually trapped inside Naruto, but he isn't aware of it. He only knows that the villagers dislike him, thus he doesn't like them. The only people who have ever really helped him are Irika Yumino, an academy teacher who has helped Naruto multiple times, and 3rd headmaster Sarutobi, the Sandaime headmaster, an elderly man who smokes an old pipe all the time. Naruto had a place to live inside the limits of Hyde Ninja Village before the villagers ransacked and set fire to the apartment. The 3rd headmaster has no idea that Naruto has already been kicked out of the village. But there was nothing that could be done about what had already been done. The worst, however, occurred 2 years ago. When the people broke into Naruto's house and dragged him into the center of the hamlet, they beat, stabbed, and burned him on fire. Naruto had just turned 6. He was only spared when the headmaster's personal guards and the village's protectors, the ANBU, finally arrived and drove the locals away while also capturing some of the attackers. After Naruto was brought to the hospital, the nurses refused to treat him because they thought he was a demon's pawn and didn't deserve medical attention. The 3rd headmaster was so furious that he almost destroyed the hospital, but he restrained himself and threatened to cancel the doctors' licenses if they refused to treat Naruto. But by the time they agreed to help, the demon within him had already cured him, so there wasn't much to do. The hospital effectively threw him out after that. The next year's birthday was similar to the previous year's, but not as bad. He managed to get away from the mob despite his wounds and make it to one of his hiding places, where he would stay safe until midnight before secretly making his way back to his apartment. However, he felt that the most recent birthday was terrible. The fact that he was kicked out of the village that day doesn't really bother him, to be honest. In the end, he finds a hollowed-out tree and makes camp there. He built a makeshift ladder for the inside of the tree because it is easier to climb the outside of the tree than the smoother inside. Before being chased out, he had crept back in to get the sheets and blankets he had used to form a makeshift bed. Both the tree's height and diameter are enormous. In order to keep the entryway dry even in the event of rain, he covers it with a waterproof cover that is the same color as the tree's bark. He looks up at the sky and waits for his clothes to dry, not caring about any of it. He stretches and closes his eyes, then opens them to see something in the sky. It nearly resembles a shooting star, but its trajectory is off because it seems to be approaching. Indeed, it is drawing nearer. Naruto watches in awe as the object gets closer, growing larger by the second, before colliding with the ground. He gets up and walks carefully over to the crater, looking over the edge, but he can't see anything because of the dust in the air, which is slowly dispersing. As it happens, he spots a strange sphere that is unlike anything he has ever seen. It's silver and black. As he gets closer, his curiosity triumphs, and he slips down the edge of the crater. He moves around the sphere and touches it, experiencing a slight warmth and a smooth yet strange texture. He continues to move and explore, terrified, until he hears a pop and then a hiss. When a hatch opens, Naruto moves to peer inside the sphere and finds a strange device inside. When he bends in to touch it out of curiosity, the device jumps up and snaps onto his wrist. He immediately scurries off, shaky and grabbing at his arm, trying in vain to tear the gadget off. Naruto briefly pauses his worry and looks at the strange object, something strange and alien flowing over it, when something appears on the device and it glows an awful green. Strangely, when he presses the top of the device, it seems to give a little, nearly like a button. He pulls it down experimentally, but he is not ready for what happens next. As the device turns green, his skin begins to ripple up his arm and up to his shoulder. Subsequently, his arm begins to emit sparks, and his body enlarges as the remainder begins to ripple and emit sparks. A strange, skin-tight suit covers his right arm and body as the flash eventually fades. He is mostly composed of yellow lightning that rides and jumps. His waist is belted in black and silver. On his right pectoral, there is a symbol that resembles the one on the device. His eyes flame a bright scarlet against the yellow of the arcing electricity. The new look so startled Naruto that he accidentally let forth a lightning bolt that struck a tree, scorching it from head to toe, leaves and all. He discovers that his voice has changed significantly after saying, "Whoa! Did I just do that? Cool!" It sounds terrible and has a static-like quality. He looks at them, flexes his hands, then flicks up another hand, launching another lightning bolt out and hitting another tree. Then he grinned. "I'm confident I could stop those villagers with this, but that would probably simply cause more issues in the future, but no one would know it was me." He muses as he plays with his new body for a few minutes before a beeping sound begins. He looks around, but he can't discover the source. The tone deepens and slows before a flash of red. Naruto is standing in the same location as the lightning creature when the red flash goes out. He looks at the device and begins to play with it. That was excellent. He begins to fiddle with the device, but nothing happens. It simply continues to flicker the same dismal red color. After a while, he stops talking and walks to his clothes, making sure they are dry before putting them on and heading to his tree. "I wonder what else this thing can do." He climbs, passes through, and covers the opening before descending within the tree. After lying down and feeling his makeshift bed, he raises his arm and takes another look at the device. "I wonder what this thing is exactly. Whatever it is, it's cool." He closes his eyes and faints in a few seconds before hiding to avoid the cold air inside the tree, thinking, "I wonder what it's called, and I wonder what that creature that I was earlier was." Over time, Naruto learns more about the device and now calls it the Omnitrix. Omni for multiplicity and trix, which is similar to trix for the different shapes it may provide. He has also given names to some of the forms he has mastered. Use Hypervolt for the electric form he encountered when he first obtained the item. Typhoon is similar to Hypervolt, but that his whole body is made up of hurricane-level humanoid winds. In honor of a greenish humanoid that has a crystal-like appearance, he dubbed Diamond Head. He has witnessed the older ninja using steel ninja tools, but his crystals are even more durable. His most recent form, which he refers to as Aqua Surge, is a water version of Typhoon that doesn't seem to be as deadly as the other two, despite the fact that his entire body is made of water. But he hasn't really gotten a chance to try Aqua Surge because it's still so new to him. He also understands that he must wait 6 minutes between usage and that he can only use the device for around 10 minutes at a time. He has also given up his favorite color, orange, in favor of an electric green that is similar to the Omnitrix's brilliance. After 2 years Naruto thinks he needs new clothes because his old ones are getting too small for his growing figure. But he needs to shop for new clothes, and shopping costs money. He travels to the third headmaster's office, the only place he can get some demon's pawn money, as no one is ready to give it to him. With his crystal knives close at hand, he reluctantly enters the hamlet and begins walking toward the headmaster tower. He has been practicing it daily, but because he has no one to teach him the proper techniques, his skills are somewhat limited. The villagers glare at him and whisper to each other, but he ignores them and continues on. Eventually, he reached the headmaster tower and went inside. The receptionist frowns as she looks up. "What do you want, demon?" she spat out. "It's really none of your concern, but if you truly must know, I'm here to see the old man," Naruto replies. Rising to her feet, the woman declares, "Not a chance, demon brat." "Oh really? Are you going to stop me?" snarls Naruto in response. If I must, then yes. No demon's pawn is going anywhere near the headmaster in an attempt to hurt him. Even your vile presence shall not be allowed near him, the woman says. The woman stiffens but does not back down when Naruto approaches and asks, "So you'll stop me alone? And then what? You assume you'll be rewarded for assaulting a child? I'll ask once more, please allow me to pass and see Gigi, Grandpa, or will we need to resort to violence?" Violence? You want violence? Then allow me to grant your wish. The woman responds, then charges at Naruto, who easily sidesteps and draws his knife. That was pathetic, lady. Rushing at an armed person is a senseless thing to do. Ignoring the woman's protests, Naruto lays down his knife and heads upstairs. He arrives, knocks on the ancient door, and waits to be admitted. The third headmaster looks up as Naruto enters. Well, look what the cat dragged in, if it isn't young Naruto. What can I do for you? He asks, folding his hands on his desk. In response, Naruto says, Gigi, I need new clothes. The third headmaster scowls. And what happened to the clothes that you used to have? Well, for one, they're getting too small. And two, they've been as for quite some time now. My place was burnt to the ground a few years ago. Did no one ever tell you about that? A headshake is given by the third headmaster. No one told me anything of the sort happened. Where have you been living since then? Living outside the village. Just coming here wasn't exactly the most thrilling thing to have happened since then after having been left alone for those past few years. The villagers drove me out on my 6th birthday, but I've learned to feed myself by hunting and foraging. However, I want to join the academy, but I need new clothes beforehand. The third headmaster grunts in dissatisfaction. How about this? I get you a place within the village, and have the ANBU guard it regularly. That way, you'll be under constant observation, as well as be closer to the academy as well. But I prefer the wilderness. It's soothing, and it allows me to be, well, me. Out there I don't have to worry about the villagers, even though they really can't do all that much to me anymore. What do you mean by that? What's that thing on your wrist? The third headmaster asks Naruto before identifying the Omnitrix on his wrist. Naruto glances at the Omnitrix before turning back to the third headmaster. He says, Another reason I would prefer to remain outside in the wilderness. It's a device of some kind that allows me to change into creatures with powerful abilities. So far I can use 4 different forms. One of them actually is what I used to make my knife. He then places his knife on the third headmaster's desk. The third headmaster picks up the blade and examines it. What is it made of? Crystal? Stone? Some kind of mineral? It's made of a type of crystal. It's very hard, and very sharp too. I actually have to use more of the crystal in order to proper hone the blade, since I doubt a normal whetstone would even affect it. So I'm assuming one of your forms creates crystals, correct? What do the others do? One is lightning or electricity based, one is composed entirely of water, and the other is composed of wind. I believe they may represent my affinities to the elements, however I cannot be certain of that fact, since I've never had any way to test them. I can also now lightly channel core energy, but that's about all I can do. The third headmaster is made him by this small piece of information. Would you like to know for certain? He says, pulling a sheet of paper from a drawer on his desk and setting it on the edge of his desk, to which the spiky-haired raven nods in accord. Just channel your core energy into this, and we'll know for certain. Naruto picks up the paper, scans it, and finds nothing of interest. Nevertheless, he focuses his inner energy on it. The paper splits in half before one of the halves splits into thirds. The uncut half crumples forcefully while the other half smolders on one third, gets wet on another, and flakes gently from the last third. The third headmaster raises an eyebrow. Interesting. You seem to have affinities for 4 of the 5 elements. though you may eventually earn fire if the low affinities for the three lesser elements mean anything. However, your lightning affinity is abnormally high. Normally the paper would just crinkle, but yours violently balled up, meaning your affinity is extraordinarily high. In fact, I don't think I've seen one that high outside of Kumo, Cloud. Nerda nods. Lightning as my primary element, that should be interesting. It was actually the form I took as well, not to mention I found out how its abilities work on accident. I launched a lightning bolt and ended up charring a tree to a crisp, leaves and all. It would make good charcoal. He chuckles. One attack did that? It takes a decent amount of electricity to char wood, not to mention turning it into charcoal, so for one attack to do that must make it extremely powerful. Hi, yes, just one attack. From what I've learned, I can remain in the forms for about 10 minutes, and it takes about 6 minutes before I can use another form after dropping out of the first one. But I didn't come to talk about this, Gigi. I still need new clothes, and these ones are, as you can see, falling apart, not to mention too small. The headmaster 3 blinked. He stammers, right, sorry. Yes, clothes. He pulls a wad of Rio from another drawer and hurls it at Nerdo while thinking about the potential of the Omnitrix. Come back here when you're done, and we'll see about getting you an actual place to live, as well as set into the academy. Nerdo gives a nod, then turns to go, heading toward the clothing store he frequently frequents. This particular store has always been regarded with respect by Nerdo. Unlike the other stores in the neighborhood, they will sell him nearly anything as long as he has the money, a little more than their usual displayed prices, just because of who he is. He enters, begins to look around, and finds some clothes that catch his eye. A white t-shirt with a black stripe down the middle of the body and some black at the sleeve cuffs, olive green cargo pants with brown pockets and gray hems, and black sandals with dark green bottoms. He takes up an intriguing-looking watch, examines it, and returns it to its original location. As he does, the Omnitrix bleeps to get his attention. He is tempted to play with his wrist as he makes his way to pay for the clothes he has selected, but he chooses to examine it more closely later since he is concerned about the possible problems it might cause. Then he changes into them after tossing the old ones in the trash. After changing, he heads back toward the headmaster tower. Once again he gets past the reluctant receptionist and enters, where the third headmaster looks at his new attire and gives him a slight nod of approval. Black, white, and green? Did you take those colors from the device on your wrist? Anyways, so how do they fit? Nerda nods. Much better than what I was wearing, and yeah, I took a bit of inspiration from the Omnitrix. The third headmaster then points to a folder near the edge of the desk. I've already got your new place set up. It's close to the place of one of the Chunin who teach at the academy. As for attending the academy, you start next week. You're all set and ready to go. He goes on. Oh, and the key is also in that folder, so don't drop it. Nerdo approaches the desk and peruses the folder. They're part of an apartment complex that's recently been renovated, and really isn't used all that much anymore, meaning you'll pretty much have that entire section to yourself. The cost is also listed there. Irika also lives nearby, so you could easily go to him if you ever need anything. According to the third head teacher. Nerdo's head goes up. So I've got an entire apartment building to myself? Cool. Do you mind if I keep the leftover Rios so I can work on furnishing the place? He asks and gets a nod. He grabs the folder and puts the key in his pocket. Then he grinned. Thanks, Gigi. I'll see you later then, he says as he practically leaves the office and heads for his new home. He quickly finds the apartment and, as he gets closer, checks the folder for the number on the key in his pocket before locking the door behind him. He sets down the folder and walks over to the counter, where he looks at the Omnitrix and notices that the button is still up, exposing an unidentified figure. As he presses it down, the button flashes green. A small, half-foot-tall extraterrestrial that resembles an amphibian can be seen strolling on 2 feet when it vanishes. Whoa! I'm so small. I wonder what kind of abilities this guy has. He gasps in a higher pitched voice than usual. He tries several unsuccessful attack moves with his various forms. He gives his head a rub. He muses to himself. Strange, I thought for sure that this guy would have some kind of cool abilities, but nothing seems to happen. He then wonders if this man truly has cerebral rather than physical skills. He begins to think. Pi is equal to 3.14159265358979323846264338327 etc., etc. Whoa. The sky is blue due to the sunlight off of crystallized water vapor within the tropospheric layer of the atmosphere, similar to that of a prism, as well as the water reflecting all colors except the color blue, which is why it's even visible at all. His eyes widen as he speaks. Whoa, this guy is crazy smart, he thinks, and then his mind starts racing. After 10 minutes, Naruto returns to his typical self. I had a lot of crazy ideas, and I believe this new man is cool. However, I must first conceal these windows and provide additional space. He snaps his knuckles and heads to another store to get linens, a mattress, enough window drapes to cover the windows of 2 flats, and other essentials in order to profit more from Diamond Head's crystals. In addition, he purchases several electronic devices for the tools and concepts of his new form. He buys more clothes, food, kitchenware, toiletries, cabinets, drawers, and shelves. He possesses a number of fully filled scrolls at the time he leaves, each sealed inside another scroll. He still has a few thousand ryo to spare, so he mentally thanks the third headmaster for sparing so much. He puts the final scroll in his pocket and heads to his favorite restaurant, Ichiraku's, which he hasn't been to in a while. He enters and sits down on a stool. He shouts, 3 large miso pork ramens. A man looks around the corner, grinning. He yells, coming up. A few minutes later, the platters of hot noodles arrive. Here you go. How have you been, Naruto? It's been a while since you last visited. The individual responds. Naruto thanks them and then splits the hashi, Japanese chopsticks, that are set in front of him. I haven't been around a whole lot, Tochiji-san. I've been away, he replies as he begins to eat. Tochi nods. I was just curious. I wouldn't want my best customer disappearing. So is there anything new that's been happening as of late? Naruto shakes his head and swallows. Not that much. Things are still pretty much the same as always. I did end up getting a new place though. An older apartment section entirely to myself, so I'll have plenty of space to myself, and I won't end up bothering people, which I see to do by just living. Tochi gave a blink. Don't know why that would be. You're respectful, are a friendly kid, not to mention you always leave us a tip when you leave. Naruto sighs. According to the villagers, I'm some kind of demon to them. I've been assaulted for years. I was driven from the village a few years ago, which is the main reason I haven't been around. The response to Tochi's question is, that's wrong and cruel. There isn't any reason to treat a child like that, no matter the reason. Does the headmaster know? Has he done anything to somehow resolve this? There's only so much that he can do. It's him against the entire village as well as the civilian council, something that shouldn't even have a say in the affairs of the ninja world. Naruto replies before starting the 3rd bowl of ramen, but Gigi does his best to help me. In addition to buying food, clothing, and other essentials, he saved enough ryo to swiftly furnish a few rooms in my new residence. Do you have any immediate plans to enroll in the academy? I'm sure you'll do fine there, Tochi says, nodding. Well, that's good, he says. You're respectful, intelligent, and eager to learn. Everyone should take those things into consideration, not some arbitrary garbage that they are ostensibly seeing to get off their high horse by harassing a child. When the 3rd bowl of ramen is finished, Naruto breathes happily and says, Thanks for the food, Ji-san. He then pays for the 3 bowls of ramen and tips generously before getting off the stool. Hey, Nerdu, take care of yourself, Tucci adds after accepting the cash. Make sure to visit more often as well. Nerdu nods before leaving the stall and returning to his flat, where we begin to stack everything neatly and unseal the scrolls. When he's done, he changes into Diamond Head and uses his crystal to practically cut down one wall, increasing the floor area. He then puts his hands on one of the walls and covers the entire space with a thin layer of crystal that is as hard as diamond but almost transparent, leaving the door unlocked. The Omnitrix timer goes off as he finishes, and he transforms back into his natural self. He makes sure his door is secured, covers the windows with the new drapes he bought, takes a shower, dries off, and puts on black shorts and boxers before setting up his apartment with the items still on the scrolls. He groans and focuses on only building them for the time being because the walls are covered in crystal, making it impossible to mount the shelves. Even when he is in his regular form, he changes back into Diamond Head and makes crystal copies of the tools he was given, as well as using his crystal to make makeshift bolts to connect the shelves to the walls at a suitable height. 10 minutes later, he is forced to revert to his regular shape by the Omnitrix. He lets out a sigh and remarks, I wonder if there's a way to make it so that certain forms stay active longer. When he opens the final scrolls, he discovers a stack of electrical devices, mechanical devices, and technological gadgets. Although he doesn't know what they do, he is confident that his intelligent friend might find a use for them. Having learned how to produce pencils from the burnt trees due to Hypervolt's electric strikes, he also keeps paper and pencil nearby. He wraps wood that has been soaked in water for a long period, then shaves the wood with his knife to reveal the charcoal. Throughout the night, he switches between his brain form and himself, calling it gray matter, working on a project, writing down strange facts, creating designs, and documenting other things that, when viewed, cause pain to his normal brain. After a while, he stops to eat, but he quickly returns to his incessant back and forth. In the end, he utilizes gray matter to jot down a list of the supplies he'll need for this project in language he can comprehend without gray matter. In order to make a stretched-out U-shaped shape that is big enough to stand on, he stays up late deconstructing the items he bought and uses Diamond Head's crystal to form a rounded rectangle that slopes up at each end. After that, he resumes deconstructing the objects. When the gadget is about finished after a few hours, he returns to gray matter to begin constructing whatever has been described in the documents. After the Omnitrix has recharged, Diamond Head is used to gently solder the devices to the rectangular crystal, and gray matter provides a few more instructions on how to attach the objects he produced. Then the gadgets seem to join together, humming in unison, and the crystal begins to float a few inches off the floor. After that, he acts normally and examines the documents. He looks at the gadget and concludes that it's time to learn how to use it. Cool, gray matter calls it a hoverboard, and he's noted that it can be used to travel quickly instead of just by foot. He tries it out and finds that you can stand on it, move it by shifting your weight, and it can go up and down. He is eager to give it a try, but he finds it hard to stay on it. He has fallen off multiple times, so he constructs makeshift straps to hold his feet on the board. I can't wait to learn core energy control, it'll make using this thing so much better. He thinks to himself as he moves around the room and does his best to test it in the cramped area. He comments, Whoa! I've been up all night, yet I'm not even tired in the least. He then goes to the file and opens it to see when he begins the academy after he eventually gets off the board. After putting on a shirt and sandals, he leaves the flat with the hoverboard tucked under his arm, saying, So a week. That should be plenty of time to get the hang of this thing. He moves to the clearing where he originally saw the Omnitrix after slipping out of the gate and back to his tree. Since he has more space now and must avoid shrubs, trees, and rocks, he remounts the hoverboard and begins to practice more. After practicing for a few hours, he progressively gains confidence and speed as he becomes accustomed to the gadget. He checks his height as well, reaching the tops of the trees with relative ease, at least 25 feet, but he hasn't even begun to push to see what the board is really capable of. He pushes the board more forcefully and quickly over the course of several more hours, until everything becomes hazy and he nearly collides with the tree. He pushes to see how far he can go, reaching at least 50 feet above the earth before the device strains to go any higher. He also makes sure the board stops exactly, which causes him to suffer from severe whiplash. This is something different. It might be frightening at times since it is so responsive. He thinks, the slightest body motion can affect this thing direction, and it has some serious speed. As he runs through the trees, returns to the clearing, and looks up at the sky midway through before slipping over the wall and heading back to the settlement. When he gets back to his apartment, he walks into the room while still on the board, goes to his bed, sits on it, and then removes his feet from the board by untangling the straps. He flips the board over to reveal a tiny set of buttons, one red and one green. He clicks the red button since nothing happens when he presses the green button. He notices that the board is becoming heavier in his palms as the hum eventually ceases. He leans the board against the wall at the foot of his bed and gives a nod of approval. He stands up and stretches, then realizes he hasn't taken down the wall yet. He groans and gets to work, relieved that he separated it into smaller parts. After dragging the pieces out, which takes about an hour, he takes a shower to wash the plaster, plexiglass, drywall, sweat, and dust off of himself. After preparing some food for himself, he eventually becomes exhausted, goes to bed, crawls under the covers, and rapidly faints. After nodding, Naruto says, "Hi. That's good to hear. In case you had forgotten, I just wanted to stop over and remind you." Naruto gives another nod. "Iruka-sensei, thank you, but that wasn't necessary. I was actually just going to get up." Iruka adds, "Well, I guess I'll be leaving. I'll see you at class, Naruto," before making his way down the nearby stairs. Naruto closes the door, goes to his dresser, changes into clean clothes, takes a shower, gets out, makes a quick breakfast in the kitchen, then heads to his bed, puts on his sandals, grabs a cloth headband he purchased, ties it on, grabs his hoverboard, and departs, locking his apartment behind him, turning on the board, strapping it to his feet, and heading towards the academy while avoiding the villagers by walking over the buildings rather than on the ground. He eventually spots the academy and makes his way there, bending, unbuckling the straps, jumping off the board, grabbing it with his hand as he goes, turning it off mid-drop, hitting the ground, rolling, and leaping to his feet before entering the building and passing other classrooms in pursuit of Iruka. He finds it at last, walks into the room, sits down, rests the board against the wall behind him, and Iruka comes up and says, "What's that?" he asks, pointing to the hoverboard. "It's simply something I created. I can move about the village more easily thanks to my hoverboard," replies Naruto. "Hoverboard? How did you manage? What exactly is it composed of? It is unlike any material I have ever seen," Iruka asks, blinking. Before pulling out his knife and setting it on his desk, Naruto says, "It's mostly crystal. It's the same material as this, but it's much more durable than the standard kunai that ninja are given. It's also rather light and sharp." Iruka looks at the knife and says, "It's pretty light. You needed to make it, but where did you find the materials?" he asks, putting down the knife. In an effort to deflect attention, Naruto lies and replies, "I found it while exploring one of the caves outside of the village. Well, it's really hard to locate." Iruka blinks and says, "Just make sure to keep it put away if you say so. Theoretically, you shouldn't even have real weapons yet, and the ones you do have will be mostly softened." "Iruka-sensei, what will you be teaching today?" Naruto asks, nodding and putting the knife back in its carrier. "You'll have to wait and find out, Naruto, just like all the other students," Iruka replies, shaking his head and grinning mischievously. "You're no fun, Iruka-sensei," Naruto scowls. When the other students begin to arrive, Iruka rolls his eyes and laughs before making his way back to the front of the room. The child sitting next to Nerda has raven hair as well, but it resembles a duck's tail. He wears light gray pants, black sandals with bandage wrappings up to his knees, and a dark gray shirt with a fan-shaped insignia consisting of blue, red, and white on the back. His eyes are charcoal black. He has a smug look on his face that says, "I'm better than you." He says, "I'm Nerda." "Great," he moans. "I have a smug bastard for a neighbor. This should be an interesting few years." Nerda turns to face the youngster and holds out his hand. He looks at Nerda as if he's only now recognizing him, then says, "Nerda friend Uchiha." He refuses to acknowledge Nerda's outstretched hand. "And Uchiha, that explains the smugness." "And Uchiha? Okay, I'm in." Nerda blinks and lowers his hand. Nerda's friend blinks. Then he turns to look more closely at Nerda's hoverboard and asks, "What is that? The name sounds familiar, but I can't recall why." "That's just my hoverboard," Nerda says as he turns. "That's really amazing, isn't it? I built it myself with a little help from a friend." "What is the purpose of it?" my Nerda friend inquires. "It makes it easier for me to go around the village." Nerda purses his lips and says, "If you want, I could let you try it out later. By just going over it when I ride it, I can pretty much avoid anything." "Interesting," nods the Nerda, the friend. "I think I'll take your offer." After telling the kids to settle down, Iruka begins talking about the tasks they will be completing during the ensuing years. After then, he asks everyone to identify themselves. While everyone does so, only a few people seem to be genuinely significant to the community. Everyone else is forgotten. Sakura Haruno, a pink-haired girl who seems to have a fangirl crush on a Nerda friend based on the way she looks at him constantly and blushes whenever she sees him. Ino Yamanaka, a platinum blonde girl who also seems to have a crush on a Nerda friend, albeit to a lesser degree. Kiba Inazuka, a brunette with slightly canine features and red fawn-like marks on his cheeks under his eyes, in addition to his Niken, ninja hound. Akamaru, a small white puppy who seems to be sleeping on Kiba's head, and Choji Akimichi, a heavy-set child who seems to never stop eating and loses his temper when someone refers to him as fat. Other than those 7, there doesn't seem to be anyone else of any real significance, at least not that he's noticed, aside from Hinata Hyuga, a quiet girl who doesn't seem like she's cut out to be a combat-oriented ninja and who blushes whenever she looks at Nerdo. Shikamaru Nara, a child who appears to be very intelligent but is too lazy to want to do anything but sleep, and Shino Abirame, an almost enigmatic boy wearing a dull green coat and black spectacles. Iruka begins by outlining the elemental nations, Hyde Ninja Village, and ninja history. Kumogakure, village hidden in the clouds; Sunagakure, village hidden in the sand; Kirigakure, village hidden in the mist; and Iwagakure, village hidden in the rocks, are among the other major villages that he talks about. The headmasters and the ANBU Black Ops, who are the village's protectors and the headmaster's personal go-to team for dangerous, classified operations, are also briefly discussed. As the day comes to an end, Iruka slowly lets everyone leave class. Nerda's friend is harassed by a number of girls, but he ignores them. To escape the fangirls, Nerda gets up, grabs his hoverboard, and leaps over the desks before waiting outside the door for his companion, who eventually does the same. After that, Nerda shows the route to a spot where he and his companion may utilize the board with ease. He turns it on and puts it down so that it hovers a few inches over the floor, saying, "It will take some time for you to adjust." He also suggests using the straps to keep your feet fastened to the board. Nerda sits down to make it easier for his friend to strap the board on when he nods and approaches it, but after assisting him up, his friend trips and falls forward, necessitating Nerda's assistance in catching him and regaining his equilibrium. The most challenging part of using this is the balance, which takes some time to master. Pretend that you're balancing on a thin, elevated platform, and use your arms to help you shift your balance until you can do it without them, says Naruto. After a while, Naruto lets his pal practice balancing by himself. Naruto can't help but laugh as he stumbles after shifting his weight too much in one direction. He then assists him in getting back up before retreating once more. After about an hour and a half of this cycle, Naruto's buddy ultimately improves to the point where they can balance rather well. As you face forward, move your weight forward a little. However, until you learn how to move, don't lean too much, Naruto suggests. When Naruto's buddy presses his weight forward a bit, the board moves a bit more suddenly than he had expected, and he stumbles backward and hits the ground. He leans forward once more, bracing himself for the sudden surge. He finds that it's easier to maintain a tiny forward weight shift while he's moving, so he leans forward a little further and picks up a little more speed. When Naruto chuckles, his pal gives him a scowl and then pushes himself up to sit, steadies himself on the board, and tries again. To turn, tilt the board slightly and shift your weight slightly to the side. Naruto yells at his friend. Remember to keep the nose of the board up a little. The board responds gracefully when Naruto's friend moves cautiously to the right, straightens out, leans his weight backwards slightly, which raises the nose, and the board rises a little higher into the air. He sees that the ground is now a foot away rather than a few inches, looks down, smirks, blinks, and leans forward more, which accelerates the board. As his partner inadvertently becomes taller, Naruto says, "Put more weight on the back to slow and more on the front to go faster." "It's quite easy," he says. "To make the nose taller, raise it. To make it shorter, lower it." After an hour of honing his skills and playing with the board, Naruto's friend stops near him. Naruto has moved to sit with his back against the bark of a huge tree in the shade. His words, "This thing is awesome. What price do you want?" "It's not for sale," Naruto says, blinking. "If you're really interested, though, I could build one for you, but you'll have to supply the materials. I mean, it's fairly simple to make. I might supply the actual board material, but you'll have to supply the technological components. I could also paint it if you give me a paint color." One of Naruto's friends considers this. "That seems reasonable enough. What will I have to purchase?" "Come by my place, I'll give you the material list there." After loosening the straps, Naruto's friend leaps from the board, picks it up, and turns it off before Naruto and his companion head to his apartment. "There's not really that much here at the moment, since I just moved in," Naruto says as they get at the flats, leaning the board against the wall and unlocking the door. Naruto's friend surveys the area and asks, "So this is where you live? Are there any neighbors?" Naruto shakes his head. "No, not really. My closest neighbors would be in the building next door because this entire building is essentially mine. I have more than enough room to manage the things I need to." Raising an eyebrow, Naruto's acquaintance looks around the room before turning back to face Naruto and remarks, "This room seems too big to be just one apartment." "That's because it's technically two apartments," Naruto says, nodding. "To make it bigger, I demolished one of the walls. I shut off the second door, so it's absolutely useless. Since no one else resides here, I could theoretically turn the entire building into one enormous room." "Is the landlord aware of your actions? To live here, what do you even play?" "I don't think they know, and I don't really care," Naruto shrugs. "I took the initiative when Gigi informed me that this building hasn't been used much because the others have lately undergone renovations. I estimate the rent to be around 40,000 Rio, $357 €302, each month." In response, the friend says, "That's pretty cheap. Actually, it's cheaper than my own." "In theory, you could live here for free because there are a lot of empty rooms," so Naruto says. "If you want, I could get you access to one of the empty rooms fairly easily. Both blocking off windows and obtaining a key to any door are easy tasks." "That's what's needed for the hoverboard," Nerda says after making a list at his desk and giving it to a friend. I can start creating one for you if you bring those things by. The Nerda friend nods and turns to go, saying, I'll consider moving here. In addition to the apparent abundance of room, there don't seems to be any bothersome fangirls. Fangirls would hardly be a problem here, says Nerda with a smirk. In specifically, this apartment. This room would be unaffected even if the entire building were set on fire. Nerda's friend blinks. And why is that? Look closely at the walls, and tell me what you see. Reaching out to touch the wall, Nerda's companion notices a very faint sheen that feels almost like glass. He glances at Nerda and asks, Is it crystal? Identical to what's on the board? Nerda nods and adds, One and the same, with a small smile on his face. It's quite simple for me to obtain. A thin layer of it covers the walls, ceiling, and floor. It's really light and as hard as a diamond, so it won't chip easily. Come by tomorrow, I'll have something for you here that you might approve of. Nerda's friend nods and leaves, and as he does, Nerda closes the door and rubs his hands together, turns into hypervolt, and uses a technique he has been practicing to pass through any electrical current source, including the electrical grid of the apartment building, and appears in one of the lower rooms of his apartment. He then waits for the Omnitrix to recharge and the shape to wear off, and after changing into Diamond Head, he uses his crystalline arms to cut through the floor, removing a large piece, before the Omnitrix reverts him just before he reaches pure soil beneath the flooring. He picks up a fistful of dirt and sifts it between his fingers, thinking, I have wind, water, and lightning. This dirt would be easy to handle if I could somehow access my earth form. He muses. Eventually, the Omnitrix recharges before beeping, just like it did when he first picked up the watch in the store and changed into gray matter. He looks at the Omnitrix briefly before applying pressure. The Omnitrix sign is on his right deltoid, which is below his shoulder but between his tricep and bicep A/N. Think about where most Velcro badges would be placed on a shirt sleeve. His joints are made of mud, and his skin bubbles and cracks before drying and turning brown. His eyes are a brilliant white, which makes them instantly distinguishable from the skin of his brown shape. He wears a silver and black belt around his waist, just like his other elemental forms. Hey, I was just wishing I had my earth form, and just think of how likely it is that I would receive exactly what I asked for just a few seconds later. Anyway, this should be simple now. He muses, intending to say out loud. Interesting. He then reaches down and touches the soil beneath him, causing it to fall and compress firmly. It appears that this form is incapable of audible speech and instead relies on some form of mind speaking. When he touches the ground once more and packs itself tightly. He ponders. I wonder if I can control the size of the area of Earth that gets moved with this ability. After returning to the area he just moved, he thinks. I wonder if I can control the size of the area of Earth that gets moved with this ability. He then focuses, and a sizable portion packs itself like rock and walks away from him. If this figure had a mouth, Nerda would smile. He opens up a fairly sizable cavern by continuing to clear enormous areas of Earth, and it takes him about 30 minutes to make the room the size he wants. After changing into Diamond Head, he applies a layer of crystal to keep it from collapsing in on itself. After finishing the steps, he heads back to the cavern and makes crystal hooks for light that he plans to add later. A little over an hour has passed by the time he finishes, and after inspecting the empty apartment and going to the door, he unlocks it and opens it. He carefully peers out to make sure no one is there. Then he changes into Diamond Head and makes a crystal key that can be used to unlock and lock the door. As soon as the Omnitrix wears off, he unlocks and enters the apartment. After leaving, he places the keys in their respective pockets, closes the door, makes sure to lock it, and returns upstairs to his apartment. When the Omnitrix recharges, he also makes a copy of the door key to his apartment before entering. He produces two because it is quite easy to make the key by pushing the crystal into the key tumbler. Making sure not to mix them up, He places the keys on the next shelf and notes that hooks must be made for them. After changing into Diamond Head, he begins making crystal kunai, and before he can move on and pick up something he started about a week ago but hasn't been working on, he makes 10 rather quickly. It's a crystal mesh weave gauntlet that is relatively light in weight but has the durability of a diamond and the flexibility of a normal glove, and its internal fabric is also elastic, so he can continue to use it as he grows. After buying everything else he needed, he used almost all of the Rio he had left from Third Headmaster on the cloth, and then he painstakingly stitched it together for hours, until the outside will be covered in black with small touches of green and silver. Sweat quickly runs off his palm because of the extraordinarily soft cotton inside. He painstakingly weaves tiny ropes of crystal together. The flexibility of the rope design appealed to him, but he still wanted the durability of the crystal. Compared to his other forms, he has used Diamond Head so often that he has exceeded the 10-minute time limit for him, but only by 5 minutes, and he makes the most of every second. He works on the glove for the next 5 hours, making sure that everything is exactly the way he wants it to be. After that, he puts it away, takes a shower, and goes to bed. The next day is pretty much the same, a slow, boring class day, fangirls harassing the Naruto friend, and finally going back to Naruto's apartment with the friend. When they get there, they enter the apartment, and after a friend enters, Naruto locks the door. He then takes a cloth from his work table and goes to the spot where he put the crystal kunais, wraps them in the cloth, and then presents the bundle to his friend Naruto. Naruto's friend pulls out a kunai after looking over the bundle's contents. "These are made of crystal. How did you acquire these?" "I did say that it's easy for me to acquire the crystal. I even carry a knife made of the crystal myself with me everywhere. It's a bit heavier than those kunai, but it's just as strong and as sharp," replies Naruto, taking out his knife and holding it out for his companion to see. "You won't want regular steel kunai after using those, although it will take some time to get used to their reduced weight." After nodding and setting down the kunais, Naruto's buddy tosses him a scroll and says, "Those are the materials you asked for. One is for the room directly below us, and the other is for the room next to it," Naruto says, reaching to the shelf and taking one of each of the double crystal keys, setting the scroll on the work tables, and passing them to his buddy. "If you choose to relocate here, the room designated for you is indicated by a blue dot. The key to the other room is empty. If you wish to use the board, I can let you in even if I'm not done with the room that the blank key leads to." "It would be good to get some more practice in with the thing," says Naruto's companion, nodding. "How long will it take you to finish creating my board then?" "Well, it took me about half a day to make my board, but that was due to not having made one before, as well as spur-of-the-moment ideas and tweaks, which I had to copy down onto paper while making it." Naruto then takes his hoverboard and heads back to his friend, turning it on halfway through and passing it to him before going to his door and grabbing the extra key as he passes. He then leaves his position and heads to the room where he created the cavern beneath it, saying, "Follow me." His friend follows him. He then leaves and heads back upstairs to his house, saying, "I apologize if it's dark in here. I haven't had a chance to set up any kind of lighting yet. If you need anything, I'll be upstairs." When he opens the scroll that his Naruto friend brought him, a number of paint cans and a stack of technological devices appear. He disassembles the devices and arranges everything in neat stacks so that he can quickly find what he wants. He then locks the door and switches to gray matter before getting on the work table and beginning to tinker. After a few hours of working and switching back and forth, Naruto is interrupted by a knock on the door. Fortunately, Naruto returns to normal after the Omnitrix, and he opens the door. Naruto's friend is standing there holding a hoverboard with its instruments still humming softly. Before shutting the door, Naruto lets his friend go by and steps aside, saying, "Press the red button on the bottom of the board." He then turns the board over, finds the button, and presses it to turn off the instruments. "That is quite easy. Anyway, after giving what you said yesterday some more attention, I believe I'll accept it and move downstairs, if that's all right with you." A friend of Naruto inquires. Naruto shrugs and says, I don't mind at all. Is it large enough as it is now, or do you want me to know the wall down like I did with my place? If the size of that one room were the same, it would appear to be sufficient. Is there any way you could also coat the room? I can, but it would be prudent to check in advance to make sure the space is sufficiently large. Because the crystal would simply get in the way and make the task more difficult than it would need to be, it would be simpler to demolish the wall if needed. That makes sense, says one of Naruto's friends, nodding. This weekend, I was considering moving. You think you might be able to help me move my belongings? Sounds like a plan, and yeah, I can help with that, replies Naruto. The Naruto friend nods and looks around before noticing the jumble of cables, parts, and other items on the work table. He shakes his head and leans the board against the wall to study all of the disassembled technology. I find all of this to be a bunch of bullshit. With the correct attitude, it's easy. However, until I finish developing the gravipulsars, it will continue to appear like a bunch of junk. While you were practicing, I completed around 3 hours worth of work. Therefore, I would estimate that there are still 6 to 9 hours left. So, what are your plans for the enormous dirt room downstairs? How on earth did you get it so quickly? The cleansing process took some time, but not as much as it could have. The hoverboards will be the intended use. For them, I intend to construct some sort of obstacle course. In this manner, we can maximize the benefits. Naruto's friend blinks. It seems like a smart concept. I'd be happy to lend you a hand if you need one. After nodding, Naruto looks at a clock that Gray Matter has constructed. So, are you hungry? Naruto's pal nods. A little, why? I normally start making dinner, or whatever you want to call it, at this time. And since you're still here, I felt it would be polite to offer some. Naruto nods before going to the kitchen to begin making dinner after a friend replies. Sure, if it's not too much of a hassle. A friend of Naruto walks around and looks at the things in Naruto's house, then looks at the few things in the room, then goes to Naruto's bed and sits on the edge of it. When the dinner is finished, Naruto feeds himself and his buddy. How did you learn to cook like this at such a young age? This is quite good, asks one of Naruto's friends. Well, living in a forest teaches you how to survive. I didn't have spices back then, so I had to learn how to cook in order to feed myself. I can now stock up on cooking supplies to use anytime I cook now that I have a location to call home, replies Naruto. Naruto's friend stops eating and looks at him. What do you mean by that? Naruto is unsure whether he wants to share some of his past issues with his friend, but he decides to take a chance and give a brief explanation because the worst that could happen is that Naruto's friend would act like the villagers. About 3 years ago, the villagers burned down my old place and expelled me from the village because they used to, no, they still do, call me Demon's Pawn. But I've never really understood why, and it's always giving me trouble, which is why my place is now covered in crystal. They can attack it as much as they want, but they can't hurt me if I'm inside. I'm not sure why my life has been challenging, but I've learned to deal with the most of the rubbish that the villagers throw at me. I now understand how to live the hard way, how to fight smart, and how to do things that the peasants only wish they could. Core energy is not necessary for the majority of the skills I am aware of. Hell, I might be able to defeat a few genin, low-level ninja, and maybe even a few unfortunate chunin with the strategies I've learnt. I am just as good at blending in as I am at standing out from my surroundings. If I don't want to be found, you probably won't find me even if you're staring at me. Nerd adds. It appears that you went through a challenging period, almost as challenging as I experienced a few years ago. Do you know what happened a few years ago? What was the Uchiha clan's outcome? Naruto's friend asks, holding on to his hashi hard, and Naruto shakes his head. The Naruto friend replies, shattering the hashi in his fingers. He told me I wasn't worth killing, that I was too weak, and that I should cultivate my hatred towards him, and that when I have the same eyes as him, then I should attempt to seek him out. With the other Uchiha excluded, I am referred to as the lone living one. My brother killed everyone in my clan except for me that night a few years ago, and when I asked why, he explained that it was to test his strength. Your brother is wrong, he says, biting his lip before moving to his friend's shoulder and placing his hand there. Being angry will simply cause you to torture yourself. You intend to take revenge on your brother? All right, then look for it. But after that, what are you going to do? When you have finally exacted revenge on your clan, what will you do? Consider it, he says before heading back to the kitchen. After deciding that he is no longer hungry, Naruto's friend looks down at his bowl, gets up, and heads to the kitchen, where Naruto takes the plate, dumps the leftover food, and washes it. I never really thought about that before, Naruto says, but you've got me wondering. Naruto respects his friend and says, there's so much you could do, but it's up to you to choose. The Naruto buddy nods as the Naruto passes him. Thanks for the meal, Naruto. I'll see you tomorrow. After that, he turns and moves to the work table, where he retrieves the cloth-bound kunai before making his way to the door and shutting it. Naruto leans against the wall and looks up at the ceiling. I never realize how tough some people's lives are, but now this has got me wondering just that, he adds. After locking the door, he takes a hot shower and soaks in the water while thinking about a variety of different possibilities. For the 100th time, he examines his wrist and wonders about the Omnitrix's origins and why it traveled to the elemental nations. He takes a half-hour shower, dries himself, and puts on fresh boxers. After thinking, I need to get my mind off of this, he switches into gray matter and walks to the work table. After that, he keeps working on creating Naruto's friend's hoverboard, focusing so hard on it that he is unaware that he has become gray matter for 30 minutes. He doesn't even receive a warning from the Omnitrix timer after completing the first Gravipulsa unit. He completes the second unit in half the time required to construct the first one, and he continues working until the Omnitrix recharges. Once he's back to normal, he attaches the Gravipulsas on the crystal board and creates the board as Diamond Head. Then, wishing he had some paper adhesive, he begins to consider how he may protect the instruments from the paint while coloring it. He is appreciative to discover a roll of paper glue among the many things his friend Naruto brought. He gently covers the instruments, and uses the Uchiha crests on the lips at the ends to carefully sketch various drawings on the top of the board. After that, he applies 2 coats of midnight black paint to the board to make sure it is dark, and then he works on the reds and whites of the crests. After that, he returns to Diamond Head, covers the freshly painted board with straps and a thin, transparent layer to prevent it from wearing, checks the board and discovers it works just like his own, stores it next to his own, and then, after turning out the lights, goes beneath the covers. After finishing his morning regiment the next day, Naruto picks up the 2 boards and carries his buddy's boards to the academy. He rides his board inside the building, slows down, releases the straps, and leaps off, then picks up his board, switches it off, and makes his way to the classroom. He finds a seat and places the boards on the wall behind him because he is always the first to arrive. When Irika notices the second board, she remains silent. Naruto's companion arrives, sits down next to Naruto, and is soon followed by fangirls. As usual, the females gripe and bemoan the fact that Naruto is allowed to sit next to his companion but they are not. Props to you, Naruto friend. I don't think I could deal with the attention that those girls give you, replies Naruto. When Naruto's friend looks at him, he notices that there are 2 boards instead of just 1. You've already finished it? How does it operate? Is it on par with yours? And I even gave it a custom paint job. Naruto nods. It's somewhat heavier than mine, but not enough to noticeably so because I put another layer of crystal to protect the paint. You can take it after the day is over. When Naruto's friend nods, the crowd groans in unison as Irika brings the room to attention. Over the course of the following weekend, they talk about the boards and his move. None of you want to do anything different from what you regularly do, is I right? Irika asks, and everyone immediately shuts up. Irika smirks. Excellent. I suggested that we go outside and practice sparring methods and tool accuracy. How are you all feeling? Irika leads everyone outside after a chorus of highs echoes through the room, where they gather around an elevated ring while she explains the rules and the overall goal. Everyone, with the exception of Nerda and his friend, ends up fighting a random person, and when called up, they enter the ring. I have a question, Nerda adds, turning to face Irika. Could I play under a somewhat different set of rules than my friend Nerda? What were you thinking of? Irika says, cocking his head to the side. I believe that we could utilize 2 specially made weaponry. To win, all it takes is one skillful, shallow cut. The thought of lethal weapons makes the other students all gasp. Nuda replies, I made the knives specifically for spars like this. And takes out 2 strangely shaped weapons. The blades have a broad, rounded guard that restricts how far they can cut, and they are about a centimeter long. After scowling at the weapons, Irika turns to her friend Nerda and asks, Are you comfortable with this? He asks, a little hesitantly. Nerda's friend nods and then picks up one of his guns, spinning it around to try to feel the weight of the heavy weapon. Yeah, I'm sure. Irika asks nervously if they're ready and nods. I really shouldn't be allowing this, but both parties are accepting of the terms of combat, she says. The winner and loser are determined by whether your opponent sustains a clean cut. I have complete authority to step in and put an end to the duel if I believe it has gone on long enough. Have you got any inquiries? He asks and earns 2 head shakes. He takes a breath before exhaling. Hajime responds, Start. He exclaims, jumping back. When Nerd grabs his friend's kunai arm, the friend throws the weapon to his free hand, blocking Nerda's incoming strike, then steps back, knees Nerda in the stomach, raises his leg, and switches the kunai back to his dominant hand. The custom kunais clang against each other as Nerda and his friend stare down before lunging. Nerda narrows his eyes, rubs his chest, and then lunges, pretending to swing, sinking to the ground and kicking his friend's feet out from under him, but the friend catches Nerda in the side with his free hand and gets back up. You're tougher than I was expecting, Nerda friend, Nerda says as he rolls away and gets back up while caressing his side. Nerda's friend smiles and remarks, You're not too bad yourself. There is a clatter, and both Nerda and his friend notice that Nerda's knife has fallen from its sheaths. Nerda lunges again, drops and rolls between his friend's legs, and then stands back up behind him. He then turns and tackles his friend from behind, knocking him to the ground, blocking the final blow and rolling to his back before kicking up and aiming for Nerda's gut again, but being stopped by his leg. Nerda reaches for his knife as his friend rolls away from him, resheathes it, makes sure the strap is tight, removes it, and throws the secured blade to Irika, who rushes Nerda's friend again. The 2 grapple together, jumping away, glaring at each other after their free arms grab the arm holding the blades and attempt to kick each other but fail. When Nerda's friend throws him the kunai, he pockets them and turns to face Irika. Not bad, Nerda friend. They both say this at the same time, and after a 10-second stare, they rush at each other, their distinctive kunai clanging against each other until they both miscalculate their attacks for parries and end up cutting each other on the cheek. This match is a draw due to both parties having received their cuts at approximately the same time. The other children murmur gently in appreciation of the good fortune, as Irika looks at them and notices the cuts. We're going to start with weapon accuracy exercises. 10 kunai and 10 shuriken will be given to each of you. To pass, you must have at least 75% accuracy. Irika goes on. So any combination of kunai totaling at least 15 is considered passing. Most of the children, who line up and take turns, average at least 10 to 15 because they are inexperienced, but some score slightly higher. Shino scores 80% with 16 strikes, Shikamaru scores 17, or 85%, Kiba scores 18 hits, or 90% of the total, and both Nerdo and his partner hit all 20, a perfect score of 100%. It's not bad at all. Most of you still have space to grow in the future. However, that target remained motionless. What about a target that moves? Irika asks. This shifting target is more challenging for almost everyone. Only 3 people received at least 15 hits. Shikamaru again received 17 hits, or 85%. Once Nerdo and his friend had a better idea of the objective, they both missed one and ended up with 19 hits, or 95%. Not bad again. Shikamaru, I think you could perform better if you worked harder. Both of you are remarkable, Nerdo and Nerdo Buddy. With a 100% accuracy rate on the stationary target and a 95% accuracy rate on the moving target, you both scored a total of 39 hits, for an average accuracy of 97.5%. For those who receive at least 90%, there is an additional test. Do either of you want to accept it? Irika earns 2 highs by asking. The unique third challenge consists of a moving target and a platform that moves randomly, and the player must hit at least 7 of the 5 kunai and 5 shuriken that are provided. The Nerdo pal chooses to use his specially designed kunai instead of the ones that are provided, and all 5 kunai and 3 shuriken, or 80% of the total, crash into the target. When it's Nerdo's turn, he uses his homemade knives, 4 kunai and 5 shuriken. He closes his eyes, relaxes, and sinks all 4 of them first, then moves on to the shuriken and sinks 3 of them before carefully aiming and tossing his knife while holding the blade between his thumb and index finger, which appears to be a miss to the others as it sails past the target. Nerdo friend gets an 80% on this, and Nerdo receives a 70%, both passing scores, Irika says with a nod of agreement. I believe that you are incorrect, Irika-sensei, the Nerdo companion says, turning to face Irika as Nerdo is still concentrating on the target. A cunning smile develops on Nerdo's face as he stares him in the eye. Irika raises an eyebrow at the statement. And why would that be? In actuality, Enardio and I received the same score. If you don't think this is true, go verify the target yourself, replies Nerdo's pal. Irika looks at the target before he approaches it, counts the tools, and finds that there are only 7. He then turns it over and points at the back, noticing his Nerdo companion pointing at the hand. Irika's eyes widen, and he looks at the victim's back again. Naturally, the target has Nerdo's knife implanted in its hilt. Before going back to Nerdo, he reaches up and pulls it free. Do you think you could do that a second time? Nerdo accepts Irika's knife and heads back to the podium, saying, Possibly. As the target and platform begin to move, Nerdo prepares, throws the knife, and it misses the target again. By the time Irika arrives to check, the knife is still embedded in the target, so he returns to Nerdo with the knife in his hand. Amazing, yet it seems impossible for someone with such little experience. Twice, while moving yourself, you strike a moving target. What's incredible is that you were able to make the knife bounce off something far away both times and strike the target in the back, where it would ordinarily be immobile and possibly even kill a living thing. Irika replies, writing down a note and mending level. You and Nerdo friend are both exceptional at weapon accuracy drills, and most jonin, high-level ninja, would have a hard time replicating that, and you're not even a genin yet. Between the double stationary, and double mobile tests, you both achieved an average accuracy of 94%. The students whisper to each other about their lack of class, and the fangirls all seem to have hearts in their eyes as they look at their Nerdo friend. I want to talk to you too after class about something, Irika says, leading the students back to the classroom. Throughout the day, Irika keeps talking about uninteresting subjects before letting them go. Then, he goes up to Nerdo and his friend and asks, Do you two practice at all outside of class? His friend shakes his head while Nerdo nods. I do sometimes, he says. When I was younger, I practiced more with my brother. I see that you both have one of these board things, Irika says, wrinkling his mouth. How would you respond to a specially designed test that would determine your true level of proficiency? The answer from Naruto is, it depends on what you have in mind. What if we constructed a custom accuracy range for you both, and you both used your board equipment together with your custom and standard steel kunai to test the limits of your abilities? Does that seem intriguing? After exchanging looks, Naruto and his companion come back to Irika and say, "Sign me up." Irika scoffs and nods, then lets the two go, saying they will see each other later, and they quickly leave the classroom after getting their boards and going back to their separate homes. When Naruto gets back to his place, he jumps off and turns off the board before he snatches the crystal mesh glove, examines it, and is satisfied with its development, then moves into Diamond Head and works on it for a few hours, only stopping to eat before returning to the glove. After calling it a day, he undresses to his boxers, gets under the covers of his bed, and immediately falls asleep. Nothing particularly noteworthy happens for a few days. Naruto keeps working on his crystal gauntlet, which is currently about 80% finished, and he also works on his hoverboard using gray matter in an effort to increase its capabilities. But not much can be done aside from small speed and hover capability improvements. Naruto didn't bring up the Omnitrix because he knows he'll bring it up later, maybe when he joins a team, especially if he wants to use his forms. Instead, he showed his pal his treehouse and the place he went to relax. The two ravens have bonded and are now what Naruto would call friends, though he's not sure how his friends would perceive their relationship. Over the past few days, a friend of Naruto has been coming to visit Naruto to practice and spar on their hoverboards, which has helped them become more creative and proficient. It can be difficult for Naruto to keep the Omnitrix quiet for as long as possible because his friend is always there, showing up when Naruto is getting back to normal. Apart from the third headmaster, whom he has already told, Naruto's friend is likely the first person he will tell, though he has thought about telling him a few times but has never done so. As the weekend dawns, Naruto has just finished his morning routine when his friend arrives at his house, ready to go downstairs. After getting dressed and getting his board, Naruto locks his own door behind him and follows his friend to his location. The friend's apartment is very similar to Naruto's, but it has more residents, most likely fangirls. The friend invites Naruto inside and shuts the door, and Naruto looks around, relieved that he remembered to get the scrolls with his past transactions. "Let's try to do this quickly and quietly," says Naruto's friend. "That's the main reason I came so early. When the fangirls wake up and begin to crowd my apartment, I'd prefer to be gone." "That makes sense," Naruto nods. "They will bitch, whine, cry, and implore you to stay if I know them, which I'm positive I do." After Naruto's friend nods, the two begin packing up Naruto's apartment and sealing everything into the scrolls. They manage to get most of the place sealed and functional in about 2 hours. However, they run out of scrolls, leaving only a large wardrobe, the futon and quilts, and a few other items. A friend of Naruto replies, "It belonged to my parent, and I'd rather not leave it." Naruto nods and says, "That wardrobe is going to be a pain to move, let alone seal. And we won't. I just mentioned that moving will be difficult." Naruto's friend pulls his door back and after sticking his head out saying, "We're clear for now, but we should go before any girls show up." Both Naruto and his friend nod and begin pocketing scrolls. They then head back to Naruto's house and quickly enter the lower apartment, to which Naruto had previously acquired a key for a friend. He unpockets the scrolls he has before turning to his Naruto companion, who is organizing and unsealing, saying, "I'm going to go and get the rest of your stuff, toss me your key." When Naruto's friend pulls the key from his pocket and tosses it to him, Naruto snatches it out of the air, exits, and returns to his old apartment, where he has to wait, while a number of fangirls try to enter, taking 10 minutes or so before they give up, and then he rushes inside and shuts the door as soon as it's safe to do so. He seals the futon on quilts and the last items before heading to the wardrobe. So, how do I go about having this thing sealed? The Omnitrix beeps as he leans against it and scowls as he asks himself this question. He approaches it and examines it to see if it can be partially disassembled, but to no avail. Nerda's eyes widen as he turns to face the device, and the selecting button is stretched, revealing a new alien image, tempting Nerda to press it, which he does. His body becomes larger and bulkier, his muscles begin to ripple and grow, a second set of eyes and arms appear beneath his previous ones, his eyes turn a deep yellow, his complexion a lifeless crimson, and he wears a tight-fitting black slacks that reveal his large bare feet and a forearm t-shirt that looks like his usual shirt with the Omnitrix insignia in the center of his chest. When the transformation is finished, Nerda looks at his new form, almost hitting the ceiling with his head, squats, and then pauses to get used to the extra limbs and double vision. The arms are easier to get used to, but the vision takes longer to focus, giving him a wide field of vision. He watches the muscles in his arms flex and tense as he clenches and unclenches his fists. In a deeper voice than Diamond Head's, he remarks, "Whoa, this guy is big." The wardrobe rises a foot off the floor, and despite his gentle setting it down, it still makes a fairly decent thud. He smiles, lifts the wardrobe again, and then uses his foot to slide a ceiling scroll underneath it, leaving the scroll partially exposed, before lowering it with another thud. "I wonder what this guy can do, though I'm guessing that due to the second set of arms, he has some serious strength," he remarks. He hears the Omnitrix's warning tone and says aloud, "This guy makes moving a cinch." Then, in a flash of red, he returns to normal. "That's going to take a little while to get used to. As for this, it's going to be interesting figuring out how I managed to get this thing onto the scroll," he thinks, while kneeling and pumping his core energy into the scroll, sealing the wardrobe in a plume of smoke. "That's going to take a little while to get used to," he thinks, before placing the last scroll in his pocket and cautiously sticking his head out. Once he's sure it's safe, he leaves, locks the door, and hoverboards swiftly back to his place. After some time, he returns, shuts the door, gets off his board, and places the scrolls that don't contain the wardrobe near his Nerda friend. Friend of Nerda. "Took you a while, Nerda. Your former site was encircled, so I had to wait a long time. The wardrobe is another story, but I managed to get it," Nerda replies, assessing the amount of space left in the apartment. "Though I think you should place it last." The Nerda friend nods and inquires, "So how did you manage to finally seal it?" "When we eventually reach the stage of unsealing it, how about I clarify that?" says Nerda, biting his lip. "Actually, I've been putting off telling you and showing you something for a long time." The person Nerda's with says, "If you say so," turning to Nerda and arching an eyebrow. "Could you please assist me with all of this?" Following that, the two work on furnishing Nerda's friend's new house. Since Nerda knows there won't be enough space for everything, they make a rather neat collection of things that still need to be placed. The friend goes to Nerda and says, "You said you'll explain when we get to the wardrobe, but we're out of space for everything. But because I think it has to do with how you take down the wall, I think you'll have to explain sooner rather than later. Am I right?" Nerda nods and says, "This is what I've been meaning to tell you about," before taking a breath and raising his arm to reveal the Omnitrix to his friend. "I don't know why I found it, but it's changed my life. This device allows me to do some pretty crazy things. This mechanism creates the boards, the canais, and the cavern next door." He begins by recounting his experience from the moment he obtained the device to the present. The Nerda friend blinks. "So you can move stuff with this gizmo, or something?" "Not quite," replies Nerda with a headshake. "It enables me to change into multiple forms, each with a unique set of abilities. I have been keeping quiet since I don't want to give myself any more problems with the public. But they will eventually learn because it's just a matter of time." The Nerda friend nods. "That's cool. He says he doesn't know how to respond to this new information." The form I use is fairly large, and I'll need space to move him. If you want me to remove the wall, we need to first make some space, he says, rearranging things to make more room, which should be roughly 5 feet wide and stretch from floor to ceiling. After adjusting the Omnitrix and finding Diamond Head by turning the dial, he turns to his friend Naruto and says, "You might want to back up a little bit," before slamming his open palm down on the raised portion. In contrast to the rounded outlines of a normal human, Naruto's limbs and body have more trapezoidal shapes. He grows larger as his skin ripples, then crystallizes and cracks slightly around his joints before turning a light greenish-blue color. He wears a full-body suit that is black on the right and white on the left, with the boots integrated into it. He has long crystal protrusions from his shoulder blades that stretch upward at an angle before halting somewhat above his head, and his eyes shine a brilliant pale yellow. After changing, he turns to Naruto and asks, "So, what do you think?" Sasuke stares at Diamond Head Naruto, not knowing how to react, but feeling a little envious of Naruto because he seems stronger than he is. Naruto turns to face the wall, turns his entire arm into a giant crystal blade, and begins to cut through it, working on the wall from this side instead, getting thorough and using the larger space. It takes about 10 minutes to remove the entire wall, broken up into smaller, more manageable parts, and then he seals off the unnecessary door by placing his palms on a wall and coating it with a thin layer of paint. "One wall removed, and an entire apartment coated in crystal," he says, glancing at his companion Naruto as the Omnitrix begins to beep as he finishes crystal coating the room. "You now have a lot of room to work with." Looking at Naruto, or more precisely, the Omnitrix, a buddy asks, "What else is that thing capable of?" he asks. "I can currently transform into 7 distinct forms using it. Diamond Head is the name of the one you just saw, and it is completely composed of crystal. He made the primary part of our hoverboards, your kunai, and my knife. The one I used to elevate the wardrobe so I could seal it is one I recently acquired but haven't given a name to yet. Then I have a little person that looks like an amphibian, and I name him Gray Matter. He made the real grav-repulsor systems that make the hoverboards work. I then have 4 more that are similar to the aspects of core energy. Raiton has hypervolt, lightning release, Suiton has aqua surge, water release, Doton has earthquake, earth release, and Futon has typhoon, wind release. I may also be able to obtain a Katon, fire release, form, but I haven't yet reached a particular event to unlock it," explains Naruto. After getting a nod, Naruto's friend blinks and says, "So you might be able to control all 5 of the core energy elements, and then gives the information some time to register. So, what is your strongest element?" "I am strongest at Raiton, followed by Suiton and Futon, then Doton and Katon. Time will tell if I have any dual elements, but I'm not sure yet." Uncertain of how to reply to Naruto without coming across as impolite, the companion nods and stays mute. After waiting for the Omnitrix to recharge, Naruto begins organizing his friend's home. The two work in silence for approximately an hour, making the place look presentable. Naruto then picks up the wardrobe scroll and moves it to a clear area before opening it. After tampering with the Omnitrix, he changes into his new form, which he hasn't given a name yet. He gets dressed, picks up the wardrobe, puts it in a decent spot, and then thumply puts it down. He then looks at his friend Naruto and observes the look on his face, to which Naruto responds, "What?" As Naruto's friend shakes his head, he says, "You have 4 arms and 4 eyes. It's just kinda weird." The only sound to shatter the tense silence that follows Naruto's transformation until he returns to normal is the Omnitrix's warning tone. "So, yep. I've benefited greatly from the Omnitrix since I discovered it, yet I still don't fully understand its capabilities." "Where did you find it exactly?" says one of Naruto's friends. "In the clearing where you first learned to use the hoverboard." Naruto's friend blinks and then shakes his head, saying, "All right, let's finish organizing the apartment. I want to be done before the sun goes down." Nerda nods and the two begin working on the room, setting it up the way his friend wants it to be, and then Nerda changes into Diamond Head and begins making a variety of boards of all sizes, which he then joins to make a large cabinet with shelves, and he makes 2 more boards, thinner than the others, and sets them aside for later use. Nerda's friend approaches and looks at the cabinet. "What are you doing?" "It's a weapons case," Nerda says, turning to face his partner and moving aside. "Almost any weapon you own can be kept and shown inside." "That's quite practical. What are the purposes of those 2 boards?" "Those are the doors, but I don't currently have any hinges, and I'm not sure if I could create any that would work. Please ask if you need anything for the interior. Just be aware that even kunai weapons require some time to create." Nerda's friend nods and says, "You created a knife, right? Do you think you could go bigger?" he asks, winning a nod. "For example, a sword, perhaps?" "Yeah, I could make a sword." "Why? Have you got a certain design in mind?" the Omnitrix asks after beeping and then returning to normal. "Not at the moment, but a sword would be cool to have in the future." Nerda ponders for a moment before saying, "I've got an idea, come with me." He then picks up his hoverboard and heads out of the house, his companion trailing behind him on his own board. After crossing the hamlet, the two of them land outside a little shop, get off, and go inside. Nerda's pal follows him to the counter after examining the several guns there. A man enters from the back room and greets Dogu, weapons and tools, on behalf of Bookie. "How can I assist you?" he asks. "Do you mind?" "My friend here wants a sword, but isn't sure what kind to get," Nerda declares, pointing to his friend. "Are there any catalogs, classifieds, or other resources we may look through?" "You mean a sword?" the man asks, raising an eyebrow at his companion Nerda. "Although I could create you one, don't you seem too young to handle a weapon?" Drawing his knife sheath, Nerda declares, "There won't be any need for you to make a weapon yourself. I believe I am proficient enough to do so myself. This knife is an example of what I have created. A wonderful make, if I may say so myself. However, the content is unlike anything I've ever seen." "What material is it composed of?" the man remarks after carefully examining the knife and removing its sheath. "It is made of an uncommon crystal that is difficult to shape. As an object, it is almost unbreakable. A standard steel broadsword couldn't possibly chip that knife, let alone shatter it." The man's eyes widen a little. "You say crystal? And if you don't mind, where did you buy this specific crystal?" "That, good sir, is a secret that I cannot reveal, unfortunately." "It's unfortunate that you said that. If I had access to it, I might be able to create the greatest tools in all of the elemental nations." "How about some form of compromise?" Nerda asked with a smile. "I coat anything you make in crystal, and you jack up the price, claiming that it's the best tool that money can buy. I request at least a quarter of the sales proceeds, but you are free to keep the majority. As a result, you'll be recognized as the preferred provider of extremely robust equipment that will undoubtedly survive for many years, if not longer. All I'm asking for is a quarter of the profits and access to any weapons design documentation you might have." The man blinks and mulls over the possibilities. Nerda's friend raises an eyebrow at Nerda. As he waits, Nerda signals his friend to go check out the store. The friend nods and leaves to check out the nearby Ninjato. "And how do I know that you won't start a store of your own once you accumulate enough, and sell cheaper, eventually running me out of business?" the guy asks again, 2 minutes after Nerda's companion departs. Nerda shakes his head, saying, "No need. Since my companion and I are both orphans of the QB, Nine Tails, attack, we would genuinely benefit nothing from such a dramatic step. For this reason, I'm allowing you to keep 75% in return for 25% in catalogs. What about this? I will occasionally supply whole crystal equipment. I think you're going to make a good living with that much crystal." Admiring the knife's perfectly carved blade, razor-sharp edge, and skillfully wrapped handle, the guy returns his attention to the one on the counter. "You really made this, kid?" I said it was a fine make, but to be completely honest, it's actually an exquisite piece, she remarked with a smile. "Only a few of the weapons I've been producing for years have ever reached this level of perfection. You've got yourself a deal if you make me 5 of these." After giving it some thought, Naruto says, 3 knives. The handle wrapping cloth is not inexpensive to purchase, and they are somewhat difficult to construct. The man's gaze narrows. 4, and I'll provide the fabric necessary for the handle wrappings, as well as any future materials required for their construction. The man says, "You know a deal when you see one, as do I. It'll be a pleasure doing business with you, Mr. Naruto says with a smile. Higurashi Tazaku. Naruto nods. "My name is Hozeki, Jewel, Tazaku-san." Tazaku raises an eyebrow and asks, "Why not give your business partner your real name?" "For personal reasons, not to insult Tazaku-san. I would like to use an alias in order to conceal the identity of the recipient of your specialist equipment." "It makes sense," Tazaku says, nodding. "Although I hope you will eventually reveal your true name to me, Hozeki-san. If you would rather only be known by your alias, then so be it. Now let's discuss that fabric. What kind of fabric is this? It looks familiar." "It's called Miitsu." Tazaku's eyes widen. "Miitsu? Why is the cloth so expensive? A fabric that costs a quarter of that amount would be sufficient, wouldn't it?" "It could indeed. I'm not very concerned with appearance, though. Miitsu is well known for its exceptional softness and durability. I don't want my hand to be damaged in a battle because the cloth protects it from the tang of the blade, especially if I'll be wielding it for a long time. It is also hydrophobic, or fearful of liquids, which means that even if it is submerged in a liquid and subsequently removed from it, it will remain dry. If it's okay with you, may I inquire how you know so much about such a high-end, unique cloth brand?" "I like to attempt to know everything there is about anything that I work with." Tazaku grins. "Normally I'd say to come back in a few days, but since I've never actually dealt with Miitsu fabric, I'm not sure how long it'll take to arrive." "After placing your order, give it roughly a week. Meanwhile, I'll get to work building the knives. Now, what about the weapon catalogs and the like?" "All right," Tazaku says. "Give me a moment." And 3 minutes later, he returns with a stack of documents, catalogs, indexes, and other things. Naruto takes the stack and seals it in a scroll that he pockets. "When I bring the blades by, I'll return this scroll. Until then, Tazaku-san." Naruto then walks out of the shop to see his friend. "How was the bartering experience?" asks Naruto's pal. "Have you been successful?" Naruto gives his pal the scroll as they hoverboard back to the flats. They leave their boards as they arrive at Naruto's residence, where Naruto tosses the scroll to the other raven. "Try not to lose any of those," is what Naruto advises. "On the day I made it, I would rather not breach Tazaku's confidence." Naruto's friend sits down on his bed after opening the scroll and begins looking through the papers, looking for anything that catches his attention. Naruto locks the door and heads to the shower, where he sits and lets the water flow down his body in an attempt to relax because he has guests. As Naruto's companion flips through the swords, he notices a Tsukinoji Matatsu blade, which resembles a katana in design but is around half a foot shorter and somewhat thicker, preserving the overall weight of the katana. Since it is still longer than a ninjato, it may still employ a few of ninjato-ken spirit art methods and katas in addition to the majority of techniques and katas that full-size swords can use. He puts it down and looks at a beautiful depiction of the Tsukimito blade. At the bottom of the image, he notices a couple of kanji, imiki, ocean wood. The weapon looks to be a piece of art, and is most likely unique. The blade is a vivid emerald that is also dark azure. As it gets closer to the guard, the sharpened edge turns from a bright silver to a midnight black. The guard's design is straightforward yet efficient. If an opponent's weapon caught in its crooks, it can disarm them. The green and blue wraps crisscross around the handle. The friend of Naruto wonders, Emiki? Why would a steel blade be called wood? Or even ocean? Anyway, the blade is unquestionably the creation of a master craftsman. Whoever made it must have put everything they knew into it, and it must have been nearly impossible to part with such an exquisity. 20 minutes later, Naruto emerges from the bathroom, and as he walks up to his friend, who is looking up, he gives Naruto the picture of Emiki. Naruto turns to his friend and asks, "You want one like this, don't you?" After taking a quick look at the drawing and remarking, "Nice sword. Do you think it could be done? I haven't finished going through the rest, but most likely yes." Naruto examines the picture once more. Naruto's friend nods and gives him the other document, saying, "Maybe. Is there more information on it?" Naruto whistles appreciatively. "A Tsukimito? Beautiful blades, but a pain and a half to properly forge, when done normally. I'd say that a crystal version may take around a month or so to properly create, not to mention I need to make 4 knives for Tazaku as part of the deal." His palm brushes his face. "Knives come first, then I'll be able to start on the sword or whatever weapon it is that you want. Though it's unlikely that I'll be able to make it a complete replica of that one, even with paint." Naruto's friend nods, gives Naruto back the documents, and sets them away. The other raven accepts Naruto's offer of onigiri with thanks when Naruto proceeds to prepare some dinner. Naruto's friend searches the other documents, but he finds no other weapons that really catch his attention and possibly compete with the Tsukimito. He reseals all the documents except those related to Miki, and as he looks up, he sees Naruto in the form of Diamond Head painstakingly crafting the crystal he creates into a knife-like shape. It doesn't appear to be going to take long. It looks like he's almost done. Then Naruto covers the length he has already made with another layer of crystal, which he essentially weaves. When Naruto's friend moves in to watch him at work, he is a little surprised by how much more complicated the process is than it first seems. Naruto remains silent even after he calms down, and waits for the Omnitrix to calm down before acting as like nothing had occurred. But after an hour, he gets bored and goes back to sit on Naruto's bed. He lies down, closes his eyes, and faints in a matter of seconds without thinking about it. 5 hours later, Naruto finishes the 4th weave layer on the knife and sets it aside. When he notices the other guy unconscious on his bed, he rolls his eyes. Going back to his normal personality, he approaches the bed and jerks his friend up, making him look at him blearily. When Naruto asks, "Sleep well?" his friend yawns and sits up. "Yes, wait, how long have I been out?" "Not sure. But with how your body is reacting, I say probably a couple of hours." "I'm sorry for bumping into your bed. I didn't realize how tired I was." "Oh no." Naruto replies, "You're fine," dismissing the apology. "It's not like I need it for the past few hours anyway," he says before heading to the kitchen to prepare dinner. "It's heavier than yours is, why is that?" he asks, his eyesight flickering out for a few seconds before returning to normal, before his buddy tosses his legs off the bed and stands, stretching, as he approaches where Naruto was and takes up the knife in progress. "What? You mean the knife? I'm not entirely sure why, but when it's finished, it will weigh the same as me. But I have a long way to go until it's finished. A full coating, for more weave layers, and finally the blade's actual honing are still necessary. But the handle is simple because it's just a simple crystal rod." The Naruto buddy puts down the knife. "That takes a lot of effort. Wouldn't one piece of crystal suffice to make it?" Diamond Head's crystals are erratic, so even though it takes longer, I do it because the more you weave around them, the lighter they get. A layer on top will be just as sturdy as a weave, but it would be heavy and the weight wouldn't be distributed evenly. It should be the other way around. That's illogical, the Naruto friend replies, shaking his head. When you weigh your kunai against my knife, for example, you will see a significant weight difference since your kunai are actually a single piece of crystal that has been cut into the shape of a kunai. The Naruto friend puts the kunai away and resheathes the knife after realizing that the kunai are actually heavier than the knife and remarks, "That's confusing." In response, Naruto says, "Indeed. I hope you don't mind, but I'm too tired to really cook anything right now." He exits the kitchen carrying a platter of sandwiches. When the food is placed down, Naruto's friend says, "It's fine," and takes a sandwich. After the meal is finished, Naruto's friend thanks him for the food and his hospitality before getting his board and going back downstairs to his house. Naruto carries the empty dish to the kitchen and puts it in the sink, yawns, and slips onto the scroll of sealed papers on his bed, rolling to one side and groaning, then carries the scroll to his nightstand, creeps under the covers, and goes to sleep.